there's a few foundational principles when it comes to choosing our foods. And metabolic, or our metabolism and metabolic typing, which is what I'm going to talk about. Our metabolism for me is more than just, we tend to talk about metabolism in terms of a weight loss. And I think that we, again, shift the focus too much towards weight loss and away from well-being, because essentially we're looking for a metabolism that's going to function and give us an optimal experience of well-being, not just the weight loss. I mean, after all, how many times have we seen really skinny people, lean, and we say, oh God, I want their metabolism. But what's their constitution of health? And I think that's more, or certainly from my perspective, that's what I look at, and that's what's important to me. So there's a few foundational principles that I've certainly learned on my journey of experimenting with a lot of different diets, which I think is a common thing amongst us all. And I've come to realize, gosh, I have so much to share with you. I get so excited. I've got this, and don't forget to say this, and don't forget to say that. And I'm like, okay, give me a second. Lord. I'll get there, okay. The first thing that I want to share is that I have been on a roller coaster, as so many of us will be familiar with. And my roller coaster has been weight. It's been a journey of learning how to love myself. That's really what my journey has been about. And food has played a huge role in that. And along this road, I was, taking myself through bodybuilding. And my last year of bodybuilding, I had just been introduced to the Czech Institute. And so with this sort of journey, a chapter closing and a new chapter opening. So I had achieved my goal. I had shedded all the weight that I'd put on as a teenager, and my brothers used to call me thunder thighs and elephant legs, and I had finally come to this point where, wow, I look so different. And then, of course, as you mentioned with any athlete, I experienced the same thing. I stopped, training as intensely, and I stopped the whole dieting routine, and the weight went back on, and I just went through all of that to have this amazing body, and now I can't keep it. And so I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way. And I probably wasn't thinking back then, but my natural path has taken me on a journey of experiential. And one of 3 or 4 principles that I want to share with you is around food. No matter what diets we choose to encourage a healthy metabolic rate or system, unless we are making good quality choices, then we're not doing anything to support our metabolism. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about metabolic typing. And there are 3 basic metabolic types. You have what they call a protein type, a carbohydrate type, or a mixed type. And what I want to be clear of here with you is that I don't pertain to any one discipline. I have taken what works for me from a whole number of different disciplines. So I don't adhere to the complete template of metabolic typing, but I take from metabolic typing what I know works for me. The core elements around how we make our choices, food being one of them. If we don't qualify the source of our food, it doesn't matter if it's a protein, if it's a carbohydrate, or if it's a fat. If we don't qualify the source, the quality of it, how do you know that that's quality protein? How do you know that that's a quality carb? How do you know that that's a quality fat? For me, that's step 1. You need to qualify the quality of your food groups, okay? And I'll go into a little bit more about that in a moment. Another foundational principle for me is that I have experimented with metabolic typing, and I do believe that there is an enormous amount of credit to be given to the fact that we are all unique. We all have our own biochemistry. Just as we all sit here with, you know, different coloured hair, different coloured eyes, we all have the same organs, but if we opened each other up, you'd find them a slightly different size in a slightly different position. So we all have our own unique chemistry. And when you're choosing your foods and you're choosing the ratio, i.e. how much of each of these, what I call macronutrients, which is your protein, your carbohydrates, and your fat, when you're starting to choose amongst these, step one is that there has to be quality there. Okay, the raw product that you're working with. And why I make mention to this is that, let's say, for example, let's say I was a carbohydrate type, which simply means, if I was to qualify these 3 different types for you, metabolic typing, just give you a little bit of history, was designed by a number of scientists and physicians in a lot of different disciplines over a period of now about 70 years. You can track it back, and it has the works of Weston A. Price, which was, he was a dentist in Cleveland, Ohio, and he went off tracking around the world for about 10 years, visiting all of these, what he called primitive cultures. And he brought his research back as to what was the fundamental foods that were keeping these various cultures healthy when they didn't have access to any privileges of the Western society. So they were still very much on their own foods. And metabolic typing came about from a whole host, dentists, surgeons, doctors, all contributing their research to their piece of the puzzle to give about how the human body works. And a guy called William Wilcott kind of picked up and ran with all of this information. He started to develop and look particularly at the metabolic systems of the body. And metabolic typing today is evaluated across sort of 3 major metabolic systems of the body, which are your endocrine system, otherwise known as your hormonal system, your autonomic nervous system, and your oxidative system. So we have, without getting, you know, overly complicated with it, we have these 3 systems within the body. And when you're determining whether or not you're more of a protein type or more of a carb type or more of a mixed type, it really depends where you hold your dominance in these 3 systems. So as an example, if you are a protein type, that simply means that your biochemistry is predisposed to metabolizing, turning the nutrients of protein and fat into energy, into fuel, really efficiently. Our metabolism and our biochemistry is developed by a number of different factors, or influenced through a number of different factors. The environment around us, what is available in nature. And we adapt, you know, we've adapted over thousands of years. So you have a protein type who, as I said, simply means that if you are a protein type, and we'll get into how do you know all that, because I can all hear you going, which one am I? I want to know now. And what do I eat? So if you're a protein type, it simply means that you are really efficient at converting the energy and the nutrients within protein and fat into energy. And that you're not so efficient at turning carbohydrates into energy. And when I say you're not very efficient, it means that you do it too quickly. Okay? When you're a protein type, you're a fast oxidator. It means that you, I'm actually a protein type. So if I, for example, sat down to a meal that was dominated by a carbohydrate food group in that meal, my metabolism would turn that into fuel so quickly and use it that I'd be hungry again very soon after that meal. So I'm left feeling empty on a full stomach. Yeah, anyone ever had that kind of experience where you've kind of eaten and you're like 20, 30 minutes later, I'm still hungry, but oh, look at what I just ate, a bowl of pasta. And so this, this experiment of the different food groups. So if you're a carb type, as an example, it simply means that you are a slow oxidizer, which means that your metabolism converts carbohydrates efficiently because it does it slowly. Okay? So there's a number of influencing factors that come into what type you are. Okay? Your hereditary makeup comes into it, even whether or not you're male or female comes into it. What your endocrine system and your hormonal system, your autonomic nervous system, whether or not you're more parasympathetic or sympathetic. Does everyone know what your autonomic nervous system? So
I don't know what parasympathetic opposed to sympathetic is.
I like to keep things as simple analogies as possible. Think of your autonomic nervous system having two pathways. One pathway being your sympathetic, and it carries the traits of your fight and flight.
Okay.
Okay? And then your other system, your other pathway, your parasympathetic, is what we call your rest and digest. So it carries the traits of the opposite of when you're wound up. Mm-hmm. You're nice and relaxed and chilled out. All the qualities that we want when we're sitting down to eat. Okay? Because when we're in the sympathetic pathway and we're too wound up, our digestive system tones itself down and it's not working as effectively. Okay? Because after all, if you're being chased by a lion, are we really worried about digesting the steak you've just eaten? What's priority? So that's, a snippet as to the sympathetic and parasympathetic. The resilience that I've built, which you could describe as my constitution of health, I've done over a period of time by simply becoming more and more aware. And once I had dropped away the shoulds and shouldn'ts and following this and following that, and I actually started to listen to what my body was sharing with me, I began to realize that to wake up in the morning as I was doing, having a big bowl of fruit and some fresh yogurt just wasn't doing it for me. But that's what, everywhere I read, that's the way to start your day. And I was just like, but my day wanted to be over by 10 o'clock because I was so tired and hungry. So I thought, and then of course, to even think about giving a go of metabolic typing was to go against all of these beliefs I had around, because I followed the same, don't eat fat will make me fat, And it was a big leap of faith to go, well, you know what have I got to lose? Because this isn't working. And that's what I kept coming back to. If you're wanting to find out, well, which way do I go? Which way do I go? Well, I don't know, so just choose one and see what happens. Because you'll find out real quick whether or not it was the optimal or the suboptimal. Because your symptoms will either start to get worse or better. So either way, you'll find out which way you need to go. So you can't not win, So that's what I started to do, and I took that leap of faith, and I went, okay, I'm going to put aside the morning ritual of my nice big bowl of tropical fruit and low-fat yogurt. Just have to laugh at what I do then and compared to what I do now. And I put all of that aside, and I said, okay, I'm going to have eggs and some avocado and a piece of whole grain toast, and I'm just going to see the difference. And that's how I started to experiment. You ready? Healthexcel.com, which is where you can take your metabolic type questionnaire. if you start to answer these questions from a place where you are not yet truly in tune with how you're feeling, and you start answering the questions from here and not from here, you're going to come out with a false positive. Okay? Because these questions are really in depth around the physiology of your body. And you need to be having a deep, intimate relationship with yourself to understand what the biofeedback is that your body's giving you, to give yourself an accurate feedback. I take two philosophies in my approach to eating. I take the philosophies of metabolic typing, and I match those with the findings of Weston A. Price and all of his research. And if you want to get into a little bit more of what that is, then look up www.westonaprice.org. It's an amazing library of information. It takes you back to the absolute soul of where food and nutrition and where the life force of where we get our food comes from. You have these three systems balanced, so you're probably starting to get a bit of an idea now of the three types. You have a protein type, does really well on proteins and fat. You have a carb type, does really well on carbohydrates. And then you have a mixed type. And a mixed oxidative type means that they do really quite well half and half, kind of like 50-50. But the tricky bit about mixed types is that their needs can change at different times of the day. So their ratio, and this is another key thing around metabolic typing. So many people I talk to who are into this metabolic typing, they go, yeah, I'm a protein type, I eat nothing but protein. That's not metabolic typing. Okay? Metabolic typing clearly states that every single meal you have, even a snack, needs to consist of protein, carbohydrate, and fat in each meal. The only thing that changes between the different types are the ratio. Okay? So it's not that just because I'm a protein type, I sit down to a meal and I don't consume carbohydrates. I do. Proteins are anything with eyes plus eggs. That's what a protein is.
Eyes plus what?
Eggs.
Eggs.
That's what a protein is. Okay? A carbohydrate is simply everything without eyes. Cheese comes from an animal, so then we need to start to, qualify where do things like dairy sit. Okay? Dairy sits in the fat section. Okay? Fat and protein. It's simply, and why, so you might be thinking, well, so how do you know that a legume is not, a protein? When you look at the breakdown of the food composition of that particular food, all foods contain protein, fat, and carbohydrate. Okay? What donates whether or not it sits as a protein or a carbohydrate is what is it dominant in. Is it dominant in a carbohydrate or is it dominant in protein? Legumes, when you look at the breakdown, is dominant in carbohydrates. Okay, so it falls under a carbohydrate. I just want to hone back in, if I may, very quickly on the vegetarian, because it is a challenge for vegetarians. And if I can give any advice to a vegetarian who's just not ready and never will be in their eyes to, consume meat, then what they need to really try to do is make sure they're getting adequate amounts of vitamin A and D. And that is challenging when that comes from animals. Vitamin D, the old myth around the sun, the truth is you need to be out in midday sun when it's at its highest point for 2 hours to convert into vitamin D. Now, that's not really practical for a lot of people. I use the metabolic typing check sheet, which is a simple sheet where you write down what you eat, and then you have 3 columns that you basically rate yourself against. How you're feeling physically, how you're feeling mentally, and how you're feeling generally well-being emotionally. About 20 to 30 minutes after your meal. It's doing 2 things. It's getting you to stop and become present, and it's getting you to drop in and ask, how am I feeling after that meal? Am I feeling tired, sluggish? Do I want a nap? Do I feel wired, a bit jittery, a bit nervous? Do I feel hungry again? How is it that I'm feeling? And right there, you have what you've just eaten, and that's your template to start playing with. So if you've ticked all the good reactions, you know that there was something right in that ratio. And I've got to try to start mimicking this again, this template. This is a template that works for me. How can I, keep that same template but choose different foods? If you're ticking all the bad reactions, well, the template's not working. What might it be? Have a look at what that meal ratio was. Was it high in protein and fat and low in carb? Swap it around in your next meal. Or swap that next day time that you had the meal, swap that around so you're even a bit closer to mimicking the same environment. Okay, so you're keeping your food times the same. And swap that around and see if you feel any different by having more carb and less protein and fat. Because some typical symptoms of somebody who's a carb type and who is eating too much fat and protein is that they will become very tired and sluggish very quickly after the meal. I, for example, who's a protein type, who does really well at converting protein and fat, if I have too much carbohydrate in my meal, and it depends on the type of carbohydrate, if it's high sugar, I'm climbing the walls. I'm manic. And then I crash. I'm like, no, I've got nothing left in me. If I have a type of carbohydrate that's a long burning, like sitting down to a bowl of pasta, I just feel stuffed in about 3 spoonfuls, and then heavy, and I want to fall asleep. So there's so many nuances that, and variables that can change the experience like that. And the most important thing, guys, is to keep this process easy and simple for yourself. And the best way to do that is just to keep coming back to how do you feel? How do you feel? You know how you feel when you've had a few too many glasses of wine, don't you? Why can't you ask the same thing about what you've just sat and eaten? And how might I change that? But I come back to the core principle is that it doesn't matter if you are swapping from a protein to a carbohydrate if the quality of that food isn't good quality in the first place. So a quality carbohydrate is not our processed pastas and white flour and breads of today. You are never going to get a realistic biofeedback by putting that sort of food into your body. We're not designed for it. I'll leave you with three tips to speed up your metabolism.
Yes.
Okay? Clean up your food, number 1. You want to speed up your metabolism, you need to take the toxins out of your diet. Toxins are stored in your fat cells. It's part of what your fat does for you. It stores toxins to keep them away from the organs. Your body has a hierarchy, okay? I can chop your arm off, but if I took your liver out and didn't replace it, you're dead. Okay? It has a hierarchy. So one of the many roles that fat plays in the body is to store the toxins away from the vital organs. So to the degree in which you're toxic, your body ain't going to say goodbye to the fat. It has a priority. Okay? So step 1, clean up your diet through really looking at the quality of the source. Okay? Then, step 2, start to listen. Apply all the principles that Julie was mentioning earlier. And then, you will start to have a greater relationship with your body in a way that you can start to interpret what it's sharing with you. And then you can start looking at applying metabolic typing, because you've got a platform that's giving you relevant information and not smeared smokes and mirrors